once again, I reiterate this has been kind of an interesting but strange case all the way along. And so, others have questioned before what leads to these conclusions being reached. Well, once again, I'm just using my intuition and deductive reasoning in this particular case. And so, at first, you don't want to reach certain conclusions, but as evidence begins to accumulate, such as this little thing that was dropped clearly at the campsite and so on, you begin to piece together exactly what happened. And since this is a very important case in relation to Kylen and Crystal Schulte, and also what happened to them, that's what's been done. So it's nearly been confirmed at this point that they were certainly at the campsite. That Earl Clark Jones has been at the campsite before, and that's fine. That proving that is easy because a lot of people have been at that campsite. Maybe they were there that same week when certain things were left behind, when his footprint was there and so on. But just because someone is essentially proven to have been at the campsite doesn't indicate anything about them having murdered someone. I've admitted that, since the beginning. So it's been proven Mr. Earl Clark Jones was certainly at the campsite. But I didn't say that proves he committed murder. But there are some other things which have come out that do not add up. And I want to thank the people who designed specifically the Craig rock climbing database and similar databases, because without it, we wouldn't have been able to truly piece together what happened in this case. And so I thank them profusely for that, because I want to say, once again, it could have been a million times harder without that database. So a Samsung mobile phone was also dropped at the campsite. And how I confirmed and linked this back to Jones was interesting, because I discovered his closest associate, his name is Danny Bryan O'Connor, happened to be a very big fan of Samsung and bragged about it a lot on Instagram. The Samsung mobile phones, the types of phones that are used with AT&T. And so, cross-checking that, I realized that Danny Bryan O'Connor was actually at the campsite that same night, that same time. And Earl Clark Jones also used the same phone. So then there was, of course, the footprint left behind that appears to very much resemble Earl Clark Jones. And from there, I was able to link O'Connor to the Craig Rock Climbing Network, thankfully, and officially confirm he was a part of it as well. So I will say from there, I strongly suspect now, Earl Clark Jones, you were involved in the murder of Kylen and Crystal Schulte, and you certainly were there at an improper time. And I suspect Danny O'Connor was there. So thank you. Now let us continue. Here's Tina Clark Jones again. And there's Tina Clark Jones, not Laundrie or anyone like that, at Signal Mountain, right by the Grand Teton National Park. That's correct. Now, this is essentially Tina Clark Jones hiding her identity, basically, is what that is. Christopher Clark Jones, who murdered someone in Australia brutally. He was a teenager, and they found the head of the victim. This is very graphic. It's Paul Bertolino's personal cinematography reel. And he is a fan of Lake Monroe, Florida. That's all for now. Thank you. Is now things are starting to come together in a very real way, where it appears, because we can't say until all the investigation is complete, but it appears that Tina Clark Jones and Robert John Jones were involved in the actual murder. And Laundrie and someone else were made to appear like they were, involved. All they did was switch something, at the campsite, and that was it. Tina Clark Jones, and specifically her brother, Earl Clark Jones, because there's an earlier trip where they also go back to Moab, which is quite bizarre. And the eyes just have never been right about any of this. Earl Clark Jones specifically. They appear to be involved in the actual homicide of none other than the Schulte family. Now, Earl Clark Jones has a habit of going, and this is quite chilling because we see once again there he is, confirmed to be the fleet manager, or at least for a time, UPS of New York. Of course, also related to Robert Hooper and Tina Clark Jones, which is known, very well at this point. His alleged wife, or someone at the time, at least for a while, Sherry Jones, is once again shown and seen. And there's just some very unusual coincidences that cannot be coincidences in that way. That show, these associates and family members of Earl Clark Jones very much in common, exactly in common, with Robert Jones and also with Tina Clark Jones, of course. Another fascinating thing is there's a historical report that's still being reviewed that shows the name of Darrell Clark Jones. And one of the first original murderers, or the alleged murderer, in other words, in the case that happened in Maryland, was named Darrell David Rice. And so there's very, very unusual links between the fact that he had these phone numbers and these addresses that were in the exact area, of course, where certain hikers disappeared, where certain incidents occurred, so forth. They will never be able to be explained as coincidence. So there's a lot of very eerie circumstantial evidence, and even some hard evidence that points to the fact that there you can see his address in Woodbridge, Virginia. That one is one he tried to hide. But just points to the fact that Earl Clark Jones is very likely a serial killer, and that they are involved in actual cover-up of murders. And so from this, what have we all learned, folks? We've learned finally, officially, that Mr. Earl Clark Jones was most definitely at the campsite and likely was involved in the murder. The content doesn't lie. It kind of speaks for itself. Now, as for, some of the issues, sometimes I receive emails, it's like the camera lens is a little bit dirty, or whatnot. Again, folks, it's like I say with everything else. I wouldn't be surprised if there's nobody nationwide who doesn't have a few things basically on the floor at this point. So, I don't do things
like other people do. I'm not going to be using some kind of green screen or something like that. It'll be on the computer, of course, you know. And so the reason that I did this, to do this higher quality video for you guys in particular, is because this is a very important case. And the details of it need to be clearly seen. You know, they need to be demonstrated in bold detail. And so that's why I went ahead and did this. But, you know, normally I'm not going to go quite to that extent very often on things. You know, I don't even have like the HGTV channel or any of this stuff that people talk about. And I probably wouldn't even subscribe to any of these channels at all, unless, you know, everything about them was completely changed. So I'm not about appearance. As you can see, sometimes there's a little bit dirty issues and things on the videos. But I did go ahead and make certain that the new content for this new special edition that was done just specifically for you guys really, really looks sharp, because this case is very, very important. And I want it to be discussed. I want it to be discussed by a lot more people, and hopefully it will be. So thank you. Thanks.
To the Appalachian Trail, decided we wanted to give the southern portion of Virginia's trail a shot. It is about 166 miles long and runs through George Washington and Jefferson National Forests from Roanoke County to Pearisburg in Giles County. It is definitely one of the more remote and less traveled parts of the trail, which is exactly what we were looking for. We gathered our gear and made our way down to the start of Virginia Creeper Trail to begin the journey. We had planned our journey to end at Damascus and figured that by the time we got there, we would be more than ready to get home. It was early October, and the changing of the leaves and colors were amazing. The air was crisp and cool, perfect hiking weather with beautiful scenery. The majority of the trip was pretty uneventful, just your typical hike. But our last couple of nights is where things got very weird. On this portion of the trail, you are supposed to camp on the trail or a designated shelter. We didn't really want to run into other people and didn't want anyone coming up on us in the middle of the night. We decided to ignore those suggestions and find our own little spot just off the trail. A little searching around, and we found a spot a little ways off the trail in the middle of a small clearing. It was perfect. We set up camp, cooked something up, talked, and then snuggled up to go to sleep that night. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I was awoke by my girlfriend shaking me awake, telling me, "Grab your gun. Someone is outside walking around our tent." She informed me that she woke up to what sounded like someone right outside the tent, running a knife or something along the side when circling us. When hiking, I always carry a I-911 and a judge with me. Those are types of guns, for those who aren't aware. You never know exactly who or what you might run into when on such a long hike, after all, in a remote area. I got the judge out of my pack, and then we sat silently listening for sounds. A few minutes of nothing but the breeze blowing through the trees, and then I heard it come. Snap. Someone or something, snap, was walking, crunch, in the woods right behind us. I got the flashlight and silently made my way out of the tent. Our fire had went out, so it was nearly pitch black, illuminated by only one dim light in the October moon. I told my girlfriend to stay put while I checked it out. I didn't flick the flashlight on right away, so as to not give away that I was out of the tent and have it become a shining beacon to find me. Instead, I waited to hear more noises. After a few minutes, snap. Crunch. It sounded like it was a bipedal coming this way, as it was very slow paced. I turned on the flashlight and flooded the area. I thought I saw someone move behind a tree. I yelled out and told them to go away and that I was armed. I kept the light on the area with my gun drawn and slowly approached towards the area where I thought I saw the figure. Then from my right, I hear what sounds like someone running away through the woods. I spin and face my light that way, and then from the original spot, hear who or whatever was there take off running through the woods. There's no way I am giving chase, so I return to my camp. I tell my girlfriend about what happened, and I end up being guarded, standing guard, officially that night until daybreak. In the morning, I looked around, but there were no signs of whatever it was. I discovered a footprint left by a boot directly in the ground right by where we slept that night. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't any of my girls. This freaked me out as it confirmed that someone, perhaps more than one person, skulked around the tent in the dark. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to freak out my girl anymore, and then she already had been. At this point, we were pretty deep in, and only 2 days remained. That day, we walked a little faster than normal and covered as much ground as possible. When it came time to set up camp, I found a spot near a cliff where we could place it and overhang that area to prevent anyone from coming up behind. The whole day up to this point had a feeling of eerie dread, like we were followed. I had no confirmation as I hadn't seen or heard anyone, but it was just this gut feeling. We set up camp and made some food, then retreated. I gave my girl the 1911, and I kept the judge next to me and assured her that if I slept, I would be with one eye open the whole night. We listened and stayed awake in the woods. I was awake for only 2 hours, just waiting to see if anything was going to happen. I guess my exhaustion caught up, and I drifted off. I awoke sometime to what sounded like someone going through our tent. I grabbed the judge gun and woke my girl, slushing her to her eyes. From the faint glow of the fire, I saw someone silhouetted against the tent, and there was someone who was there. I yelled out, "If we are armed, get out of here." They dropped what they were doing and bolted. I came out, gun drawn and ready to shoot. Our stuff was strewn everywhere. They had rummaged through almost everything. I walked to the edge of the woods in the direction of whatever fled. There was a creek nearby, and I walked to the edge where there was a small trail running along. So down the creek, I could see light. It appeared like a lantern. Then I saw 3 lights emerge at the other side of the woods. I told my girl to pack up. We're getting the heck out of here. We left everything behind. I kept hearing people talking off in the woods and hearing branches snap. I kept looking behind every second to make sure no one was there. It was completely nerve-wracking. If something happened, we were still a long ways from anywhere and quite literally on our own. We had never seen anything like it the entire time since. I really felt we were in serious danger. We walked away when I heard something in the woods. As we rounded a corner, I turned around and I saw what it was at the trail, just watching us. It was just as the sun was coming up, and barely any light. I couldn't make out any feature, just a silhouette. I stopped and looked at them and asked who they were, but they just stood there watching and then turned and ran back into the woods. We picked up the pace to get out of there, but my gut told me they were there for quite a few ways, right there. We made it out of the Virginia woods without becoming a meal for this cannibalistic murderer, which is what I pictured happening in my head. I have no idea who it was or what they want. Maybe it was someone that was just messing with us after all. Or maybe it was a group of hillbillies who were hunting us. I will never know, because I will not be returning to find out. And it may have been Earl Clark Jones. That's right. Last part of this. In the Rocky Mountain National Park, remains of Rudy Motor were just discovered after 38 years from being dead. Mr. Jones, although I have no proof and I have nothing that could possibly connect you right now, I have a strong intuitive feeling that you know what happened to Rudy Motor. I feel that you may have killed him. Someone is going to come out, Mr. Earl Jones, and discuss whether these other older murders possibly belong to you. I believe you killed him. Or I believe you were involved and knew who did. Thank you. Robert Jones. He looks extremely creepy at night. And once again, we're speaking about evidence here, inferred evidence, also some hard evidence. This is none other than the Triangle Rock Club. The Triangle Rock Club has a number of special badges and special club logos specifically for camping and other events. The Triangle Rock Club is interestingly located in Richmond, Virginia, and also Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, they tried to hide this logo, which is found directly at the campsite. That's correct. The campsite that's right there near Moab. And evidently somebody else found this logo on a kind of keychain belonging to someone at the campsite. Now, after analyzing the pictures and doing some cross-comparison analysis, it's started to look very, very likely, if not an exact match, for belonging to the Triangle Rock Club. Now, why is this important to make note of? The reason why this is important to make note of is that the Triangle Rock Club itself is located approximately 1 hour from the actual place that Earl Clark Jones lived. Both his address in Virginia, to be exact, and his address in North Carolina. 2 hours from his street address in North Carolina. Only 1 hour from his address, ironically enough, within Virginia State. So this is very interesting. Inferred evidence at this point that Mr. Earl Clark Jones, there's the address right there, on Thalboro Street in Richmond, Virginia. But anyway, it's just interesting, inferred evidence that Mr. Earl Clark Jones was 100% at the campsite. He had dropped something there, and his footprint, or at least the remains of a footprint, was over there. Thank you. Here is simply a much closer inspection of a few of the badges that the Triangle Rock Club uses in all of their affairs, events, and camps. Now, interestingly enough, when looking at those photos very closely, I don't know. Doesn't it seem like the resemblance is literally uncanny to the one found at the actual campsite? Because it's one of several that the Triangle Rock Club uses exclusively for all of their campouts. And the Rock Climbing Club in Boston and the other one just never seemed to really match or fit what that one is truly conveying. And interestingly enough, the Triangle Rock Club appears to be a match. Now at this point, there's other things that have to be looked at very carefully in the range of direct evidence, of hard evidence. But we no longer have to prove to anyone or anything beyond some variable that the logos found on the actual keychain itself at the campsite, and also pictures of Laundrie or somebody else climbing in the gym, match Triangle Rock Club. We don't have to prove that they're, an exact identical match to the badges that Triangle Rock Club clearly gives out. Really, the Jones brothers specifically, Earl Jones, needs to prove he didn't drop something by accident at the campsite, which appears to have the logo that is linked directly to Triangle Rock Club, not some other random rock club, because he also has been a member of several rock climbing clubs, specifically in the area of Frederick, Maryland. So there's enough inferred evidence, including parts of the footprint and things like that, to say, yeah, I do suspect, and I have a clean conscience for suspecting, Earl Clark Jones was involved in the homicide of the Schultes, and perhaps someone else, because we need to look at each part of Triangle Rock Club more closely, and other evidence more closely. Thank you. So this is very vital to document, because we deal mainly with evidence and also inferred evidence, of course. This is none other than Christopher Jones at the climbing club known exclusively as the Crag. That's correct. So this is Christopher Jones, who's the Australian, is who we're talking about. He's a member of the Crag, which is an official climbing club directly there in Frederick, Maryland. That is correct. It also has an affiliate company that goes kind of global. So, this is unmistakable once again. It's Christopher Jones, a member of the same climbing club in that area of Frederick, Maryland. Now, I won't get into the exact details of that too much. Earl Jones' car has certainly been spotted there in the area before. And the Crag is a very exclusive kind of climbing club, which is interesting. So we're going to see that both Christopher Jones himself, with his official emblem card and all of that, is a member of the Crag. But also so is Robert Jones. And so also is Bill Jones. We're going to confirm that on here. Thank you. Robert Jones speaking about tag-along expedition. Spooky stuff, because it just gets to be that sort of thing. This is Robert Jones once again. Now, Robert John Jones, for some reason, has lived in a lot of places in Utah, but he's also lived all over nationwide as well. And there's some very chilling things about this particular Jones brother in this case. Is what I will say on that for now. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence. No real hard evidence yet, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that ties him directly to North Carolina. Strange associations with North Carolina and South Carolina, where just so many of these hikers disappeared. It's just incredible. And he has more than 7 or 8 different email addresses and similar things. And of course, he has a lot in common. His friend Kristen Gillette again. He has plenty in common with Earl Clark Jones. And just not alone on their own. I don't think I'd be convinced with the evidence separated out like that. But when these factors are really added together, folks, and you start looking at the fact that they carried long guns or long rifles, and you look at the fact that a man by the name of Craig or Gregory something Robinson or something is like a friend of theirs, and similar things, they add up to the fact that something really, really eerie has been going on here. These people know each other quite well. They seem to be very familiar with these areas where all these hikers would frequently travel to. And you just can't have those kind of coincidences. Thank you. Jones Falls Trail outside of Frederick, Maryland was named after basically the uncle of Earl Clark Jones. There's a set of harrowing stories about hikers and others who disappeared near that trail. Anyway, Mr. Jones, or Clark Jones' uncle, was there when the original naming ceremony happened. Thank you. So here we are once again. This is Robert John Jones. Robert Jones. And he has been discovered to be an exclusive member of the Craig Rock Climbing Club. Now, if Earl Jones didn't really hang out that much with his brother-in-law or whatnot, Robert John Jones, why is Robert Jones officially a member of his rock climbing club and also a hiking club that's right there in Frederick, Maryland? That's right. And of course, Earl Jones' own vehicle has been spotted before in the area of the Craig. Although he is not an official member, it seems he goes there quite frequently and also goes to the hiking club quite frequently. Thank you. That's all for now. This is Earl Clark Jones' direct cousin. Unknown. The first name was. He started up Jones Hunting Adventures of North Carolina, which also does a lot of hunting, specifically on preserve-style land or on the woodlands, the actual woodlands, where these trails cross a lot of times in South Carolina. So South Carolina, as well as North Carolina, were one of the specific spots they chose to do these things. And so, this more and more makes me suspect, because I want to do this to bring justice, certainly, to the Schultes and others who were murdered. But it's still, I just need to say I suspect Earl Clark Jones to be strongly linked and involved. He probably was involved, but I can't say anything definitively about him stalking and killing these hikers. It's very strange that the trails run, directly near these campgrounds, and that there's all these chilling stories of campers and hikers and others who disappeared on these trails, often in the afternoon, as though nobody ever noticed. Thank you. So obviously, Mr. Jones, Mr. Earl Jones, I don't want to go out on a limb and accidentally accuse you of something that could not possibly be true or be a problem later. So I won't say you had anything to do with the death of Jared Hembry was his name, actually. But this, of course, is very plausible. You may be, in fact, connected to the death of the hiker named Chad Seeger, who turned up recently and his full body was discovered in North Carolina's National Forest. And you can claim, I've never heard of anybody by that name of Seeger, heard of any hikers similar to that. But of course, if we look at the membership roster for the Craig, which you were fond of going to, we see Mr. Chad Seeger's likely brother or brother-in-law is a member of the Craig in your same area. So it's highly, highly unlikely that you do not know anything about Chad Seeger's untimely demise. Thank you. And Mr. Jones, if you're going to say later, I've never heard of the younger Blake Compton or any of the Comptons, well, again, your vehicle is officially cited and spotted going to these hiking groups and going to none other than the Craig, where you may not be an enrolled member. But there is evidence you visited the Craig Rock Climbing Association many times in Frederick, Maryland. And the Comptons, nearly all of them, including Scott Compton, Gary Compton, and Amy Compton, are all honorary members and climbers there. So, of course, you do in fact know the Comptons, don't you? As well as Blake Compton. That's correct. Thank you. This is very important to document here. This is none other than Bayside Rock Climbing of Melbourne, Australia. Bayside Rock Climbing is the affiliate company. Belongs to the same network as the Triangle Rock Club. Now, certain things are still needing to be heavily investigated about these 2 or 3 rock climbing clubs. But it appears now that Christopher Clark Jones was indeed a member of the Bayside Rock Climbing Club, which further connects him directly to the Jones brothers' activities in the United States, of course. More importantly than that, Christopher Clark Jones appears to have been an associate of Terrence Darrell Kelly. That's right, the Cleo Smith abductions. This would link it to the Cleo Smith abductions. Now, what's interesting here is Bayside Rock Climbing hasn't been around for a very long time, but they have strong ties to the Craig Rock Climbing Group, apparently, which is interesting because Christopher Clark Jones is a member of the Craig. So there's some inferred evidence there that we can now, look at this a little deeper and say, there's some important questions that have to be answered by Mr. Earl Clark Jones, to be exact, and also by his brother, Robert Jones. Just very important questions, I would say, to determine if, they are not out committing homicides. Why were they members of these rock climbing clubs? And exactly why were the addresses for these clubs, and specifically some of the hiking clubs registered in Frederick, Maryland, why were they directly next to the trails where some of these hikers disappeared, and so on? That could begin a new investigation over there. But most importantly, why were they members of these climbing clubs and also in Moab, Utah, during the original timeline? Very good questions to ask. And I could say, officially, that just makes me suspect that Earl Clark Jones was involved in the Schulte killing. Because I can officially say, everything is pointing in a direction that the jury is going to want to very, very much look at, They're going to want to look at all the details, though. They're going to want, they're going to be interested in checking out everything about it so they can look at it in depth versus just have someone slam the gavel down and say, this is what happened. No, they're going to want to look at this situation in depth, and they're going to want to look at why were they members of the Craig rock climbing group and club. So thank you once again. We're getting closer now. Thank you.
Earl Clark Jones in Pittsford, New York. Same place that Tina Clark Jones is a very, very big fan of. Right directly next to a hunting range. Now, he was a fan, a huge, huge fan of canals and going out on boats for trips. So this is a very interesting little bit of history. Thank you.
Very important to document for some reason. Some comments and other emails and things, of course, that I've gotten all the way along comment and speak about things like, well, yeah, but that's still inferring a lot. I mean, we don't have direct evidence until really the investigation fully opens up and things like that. Again, folks, if you pay close attention to what's been presented on the Kylen and Crystal Schulte case especially, you're going to find there is a good quantity of direct inferred evidence that you can't ignore. And one of those things was a search warrant, that I've submitted and included in the actual video, particularly this time, since the jury is looking at certain things. In the search warrant, they described one of the items that are removed from the campsite that same night. And one of them was a specialized Samsung mobile phone. That's correct, a specialized Samsung mobile phone. Now, who we have here in this photo and video for this reason is Mr. Danny Bryan O'Connor. That's correct. His real name is Danny Bryan O'Connor. And he is from North Carolina. We will see why this is important. Danny Bryan O'Connor is his real name. Sometimes he calls himself Danny O'Brien, etc. Phone numbers are always going to be blurred out, folks. Just know that. But he owns a mobile phone by AT&T, and AT&T frequently does premier contracts with Samsung. So I checked on that, and it turns out Danny Bryan O'Connor owns, a Samsung mobile phone, a specialized one. Not only that, of course, this is why we're looking at this now. He is a major fan of Samsung mobile high-definition phones. What do you know? Brian Laundrie, of course, never carried any kind of a Samsung phone or anything like that. So we have now Danny Bryan O'Connor. He has an actual Samsung mobile phone. And that's important because he's not the only one who uses it. Who else uses it? Earl Clark Jones, Ryan Carter Jones, Sherry Eileen Jones, and so on. The direct, close.
So when it comes to the Craig rock climbing group, it's now confirmed that it's opened up a lot of other interesting points of contention for this specific case. And I know that quite well from dealing with certain things with court very recently. So, when Earl Clark Jones says he doesn't remember, or similar things, it's like all we need to do is check the records of the Craig and pretty much reveals the whole story. Now, I'm one of those few people out there who's really not ever seen many movies. There's certain movies I've seen a couple of times, but haven't seen certain movies, ever all the way through. One of those, and actually my good friend is the exact same way, for sure, or he wouldn't be a friend of mine, no question. One of those movies I had actually not ever seen all the way through for some reason was Vertical Limit, believe it or not. And so this year, in 2021, I just decided to finally watch everything that goes on in Vertical Limit for various reasons, for things that's been going on with court cases, for things that have been going on in general. And what it revealed to me is that this case deals with the Schultes and deals with other similar victims is very, very similar to what occurs in Vertical Limit. They think, it's nothing much going on. Then they realize the climbers are actually involved, with this whole thing. People are disappearing, and then all of a sudden it becomes crystal clear what really happened. And so, just a slight comment I'll make on that. I will find it very interesting to see whether the jury and the people involved in the jury itself will have seen the film Vertical Limit. Because, the resemblance between these two items is absolutely uncanny at this point. And it shows that what they were doing out there in Hollywood and similar, they were already planning these sorts of things. So thank you.
So this is the map, essentially. And this is, the Grand Teton National Park that is being looked at here. So Robert Laundrie, he disappeared right here in this area, the Grand Teton National Park. And also several others ended up disappearing, specifically Cian McLaughlin and someone the last name Calderon. Now, each of them you can see here on this map ended up disappearing quite close to Route 89, apparently. So it's kind of a concerning thing to see it like this. Not going to use special equipment, I just have the equipment that I have. So the interesting part here was, on the morning of July 16th, 2009, a young man also named Brayden Fuchsa, apparently, got a flat tire near Wheatland, Wyoming, and he got it fixed from an auto repair center. But at noon, his abandoned vehicle was found by the Wyoming Highway Patrol, and the state troopers were along that same interstate. And they couldn't understand whatever became of Mr. Brayden Fuchsa. So this is interesting, folks, because if we look here, go back to none other than the Craig, we see once again it's someone there that's been there even recently as well, who's named Braden Ianello. And that's very fascinating because it turns out this is apparently a cousin and relative of Mr. Brayden Fuchsa, who we see right here. Okay? So then, this once again leads us to inescapable conclusion that there was just simply a lot more going on here than meets the eye. That's correct. And of course, Robert Laundrie, right? His remains were discovered right around this area that I'm clicking on here. And it was never explained. And Calderon, well, he was discovered right here near the Wyoming hills by Grand Teton. So now we know that someone is lying, and most likely because Earl Clark Jones is a very, very major contributor in a lot of ways to the Craig Rock Climbing Network. that someone who is lying is most likely Earl Jones himself. Because David Calderon, Louis Calderon, and quite a few others are also a part of the Craig rock climbing network that he has famously gone to all the time and financially contributed to, with Jones' own family members giving the financial contributions. So this was fascinating. And it's not ideal, admittedly, but being able to look at this map and spot, where these people died, with the exclusion of Jared Hembry, starts to add up, folks. Mr. Earl Clark Jones is involved, most certainly, and probably, in the death of nearly, if not all, of these hikers. Thank you. So once again, this is very important, so we're documenting the key facts and the key factors involved. This is none other than Ryan Jones. And of course, it's very important to look at. Now, Ryan Jones is Ryan Eric Jones, who's a member of Earth Trek's rock climbing club in none other than Rockville, Maryland, directly next to where Earl Clark Jones lives, or has lived for a long time in the past, in iJams land, Maryland, and specifically Frederick, Maryland, the most important component. Here's Ryan E. Jones at Earth Trek. And of course, it's a very important piece of evidence, because when we go back and look at things in a concrete way, Earl Jones is, he's going to say, I've never heard of these people. I've never heard of Blake Compton, etc. And, I'm going to go ahead and I think investigators are also going to ask him, is that so? Then why is Ryan E. Jones, not someone else, a member of the Craig, where your vehicle has frequently been spotted going? And the Craig is a very well-known rock climbing group, and there's performance metrics. No, Mr. Jones, we can officially say that you, in fact, do know Ryan Jones, because he's right there in your hometown, and he is either your nephew, Mr. Earl Jones, or he's most likely just a cousin or something directly related to your brother who also lives there in Maryland. So again, saying that you don't know Blake Compton, you don't know Ryan E. Jones, that's very unlikely, because they belong to the Craig. And there's hard evidence showing them being official members in the roster for the Craig rock climbing group. And interestingly enough, that ties you back to something, because your vehicle has been spotted going, to those areas. And this is something I'm going to show just for a moment. Very, very unfortunate and sad. It's a couple of dismembered hikers that were found very close to Frederick, Maryland. It says the woman's cause of death is pending an autopsy that's still ongoing, because they're not clear how she was found in the park. But the Baltimore field office is still placing that under investigation. Investigators believe her body was not in the park too long because she was wearing light clothing, which indicates warm weather. There's a keychain that was dropped. Mr. Jones, does that possibly look familiar maybe? Mr. Clark Jones, I find that very interesting, because it's, right there directly next to where you've lived for a long time in Frederick, Maryland. I think someone can tell us and come clean more or less about what's really been going on in Maryland. There's someone who knows information, Mr. Clark Jones. So you can claim you don't know these climbers. You can claim that you don't know certain members of your family. Once again, folks, because I get the question a lot, ballistics take a long time, and they're often not conclusive. And I do feel now, because we always need to follow where the evidence leads, I do feel and strongly suspect that Earl Clark Jones was involved in the murder and is a more likely suspect. This does not at all take Brian off the hook, or Laundrie, off the hook for certain things. He probably killed other people, but the evidence strongly points in the direction of Jones being one of the main culprits, and especially a murderer of a number of these hikers. You just can't make this stuff up at all at this point, and so. It definitely points in that direction. So I will say that the ballistics take a while to come back, even after this evidence has been shown now, Danny O'Brien and so forth, at the campsite that night. Ballistics could still be, a while. But the point being, it was a long barrel revolver, of course, and it was not a stars and striped covered gun like in the Laundrie residence. So I believe it'll come back, and the results, will not be determined right then, but they'll have, more than enough as far as you can track it back through the registry, and I certainly believe that the registry will confirm it belonged to one of the Jones brothers. Of course, what's interesting about all that is, it was not that smart to make it a long barrel revolver. That's not a handgun that some random fool like John Freeman Colt working with Laundrie would use. That's the type of gun and only the firearm that the Jones brothers use. And so it looks obvious that this was a coordinated hit. So thank you again. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. There's more to come.